and a very warm welcome, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed panelists. Really appreciate you accepting our invitation to participate in this panel discussion on EV industry trends, hurdles, and the journey ahead. Before I begin, I would like all of you to kindly put your hands together for a big round of applause. I'll tell you the reason after that. A bigger round. Yeah, slightly louder, because it deserves a round of applause. That's not so much that this is the 7th edition of the ETAuto EV Conclave, but the main reason is that the Indian EV industry crossed the 1 million unit milestone for the first time in 2022. Just about it. So that calls for a round of applause, and thank you, gentlemen and ladies, for your participation, and to congratulations all the industry leaders. I'm sure it's 1 million, some may argue may not be a big number considering the scale of the Indian industry currently and the opportunities that lie ahead, but nonetheless, it's a big milestone in the emerging EV industry. So, gentlemen, start off to take a cue from that. Quick take from each one of you, gentlemen, on 2023. How is it looking like in terms of the industry growth? Because when it comes to any discussions around EV industry and the development of the technology and the scale, exponential is a commonly used term. So to start off with you, Mr. Munjal, also because you are a representative of the two-wheeler segment, which is leading the charge, so to speak, in the EV industry's growth.
Thank you, Sumantra. Good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure being here today. So this year ahead is going to be an extremely exciting year. We are already hitting that what they call as hockey stick growth. Even though the base, as you were saying, it may be small, but we are moving from about 2% of the total two-wheeler industry in terms of electric to about over 5% in a year. That's a huge amount of growth. So what we're going to see going forward from here, whatever projections that we have in terms of growth, in terms of conversion from IC to electric, in terms of how this sector is going to grow, what I anticipate is that we're going to be surprised with the kind of growth that we're going to see. And that's on account of multiple reasons. Your TCO, in any case, is lower for electric. With the initial purchase price also coming lower, then there's no reason why people would start switching to IC engine industries. So I think we're going to see tremendous amount of growth, much larger than what we've anticipated or projected earlier.
Great. Just to put that into perspective, the milestone of 1 million is that this was a growth, more than 3x growth from the level of roughly about 3.2 lakh EVs in 2021. And 1 million was, ladies and gentlemen, about little over 1/7 of the global EV sales in the year 2022 of about 7.8 million units. That's the kind of contribution that India made. And I'm sure India as an electric vehicle hub is going to grow at a very exponential rate. Nishant, your viewpoint from a commercial vehicle perspective, about 40% is what the penetration is expected in the bus segment at least, and it could be a little different in the truck segment, but your take on the EV industry's growth, especially in the commercial vehicle in 2023.
No, so I see that the industry is well poised to take off, and definitely in the last year the growth has been substantial. What we are seeing in electric buses is today India has about 1.8 million buses in the country, where we are having a penetration of less than 1 per thousand, and this will go to about 1.5 per thousand clearly. And here there are two things, augmentation and replacement, and the government is really focusing on this. The private sector, we see that multiple companies are looking at ESG, SDG goals, which they are adopting, whether it's Indian or global companies. At the same time, multiple schools, airports are adopting this, and corporates are looking at it. And every person is feeling more responsible about health and environment, especially after COVID. So it has got accelerated, and all of us see that we have that onus upon ourselves. So this is bound to grow, and I personally feel that by 2030 we would see more than 50% of new buses to be electric, and by then we are looking at about 100 billion e-kilometers. So when we are talking about 100 billion e-kilometers by 2030, so that's a huge number, and when we're looking at that number, that is going to change the way people operate, because today more than 90% people are using public transport, and 90% of India uses public transport for different kinds of commute at different times. So one has to clearly give a solution for the masses, for the whole country, and for each common man, so that how are they using a product which is a choice they are making instead of a need which they have. So that's a transitioning perspective which I look at in this case.
100 billion e-kilometers that you mentioned, right, Nishant? I mean, look at it from the positive impact in terms of the carbon footprint. And if the rate of growth of the source of energy is increasingly renewable, which, by the way, Nishant's own company is a big investor in that, in renewable energy, the impact and the contribution towards India's journey towards carbon neutrality by 2070 will be very, very significant, and the EV industry can play a very big role overall across segments. Jyoti, correct me if I'm wrong, in the passenger vehicle industry, if you look at the cream of the industry, which is the luxury vehicles, apparently the challenge there is not so much of a demand, it's more of a supply issue. Just could you throw some light on how is the consumer response, feedback, demand when it comes to that segment of luxury electrics, and what is the scope you see for 2023 for Volvo and for overall the luxury electric segment?
Yeah, so you're right. I think if you go back and see last year, we were constrained by supplies. And I think that was across the board. We heard about the chip shortage and logistical challenges and everything else. So that's true, and that's true for all the segments. But if you see for EVs, especially for luxury cars, I think there has been a sea change. 2 years back, the discussion was about when should one come forward and buy a EV. Today, customer is coming forward and actually putting the money and I think ready to buy and deciding, okay, this is the car I want. And then it was a question of having enough cars. So we launched our XC40 Recharge last year, which is our first electric car here in India. And we got tremendous response. And to the extent that we are thinking that should we, or on this car line, XC40 is available both in petrol and electric, how fast should we change from ICE to BEV completely, at least for this car line, it's that good.
So you see a scenario where it will be viable for you to offer only the XC40 Recharge?
Yeah, so we are, I think, and that has to be based on the consumer response, and the response has been fantastic. So we believe that globally we have spoken about by 2025 we want to sell 50% electric cars worldwide, and by 2030 become a full electric car company. But in India, I think this transition can be much faster, especially in our segment. So I think luxury car buyers are much more mature. They are sort of having multiple car owners. A lot of anxieties that we talk about related to EVs are not really bothering our customers. That's what we hear from our customers. They are ready to take the plunge. They want to buy a car which sort of is, but Indian customer is also value conscious, right? You have to offer a car which is, when compared to an ICE variant, reasonable. People understand this technology is costlier. There is a ready premium which customer is ready to pay, but how much? It can't be 50%, 60% on top of ICE. If it is a reasonable range, customer is very much willing to come forward and buy, and that's what we are seeing. What we need basically is continuity of policies. This is possible because of the current level of duties and taxes, which need to continue. So that, and that's, I think, for across the industry. I'm not just talking about luxury, but I think everybody, this continuity of policy will really help us. But I see, when you talk about 23, you will see a big growth happening in the EV segment, in PV, passenger vehicles, and also in luxury vehicles.
I see. Deepak, coming to you. You are not an OEM, but you are what I would categorize as an increasingly important component in this whole new age industry. That's a technology supplier. I mean, automotive industry has always been technology, a kind of a landscape for technology, but it's becoming increasingly technology intensive, capital intensive, and at the time where product life cycles are shrinking. Therefore, your role as a technology partner becomes all the more crucial. In this whole picture, as a collaboration is becoming almost the name of the game as a strategy. So tell us, how do you see your role or the role of technology companies like yours bringing more value to the table?
Yep. So good afternoon. Yes, you are absolutely right. The technology companies are actually playing a major role. Just to give you a perspective, if you go back 2018 and 19, it was going at a regular pace in which the technology adoption was actually planned. Then suddenly we all know that the pandemic came into picture, and then in 2020, we thought somewhere the new way of working will actually take the technology to a next level, where work from anywhere or work from any place where you want, right? So in that context, organization like us, particularly I'm talking about India specific, so we saw 2021, we are back to growth equal to 2019. Where we were in 2019, we were able to kind of like, come back in 2021. 2022, the same trend was actually expected, but you heard all the leaders talking about the plan, the future plan, and then picking up their own requirement, which is at a high level, right? High requirements. So we saw a good growth close to around 29% in 2022. So that means it's a clear indication that day by day, the technology is not becoming just to have a kind of good to have a solution. So it actually plays a major role in the overall ecosystem. So in that context, technology plays a major role from the collaboration standpoint, as you rightly said.
And across the value chain, right?
From
logistics to manufacturing
exactly,
to the retail
so,
as well.
Yeah, if you take typically any technology was used at different, or rather I should say in silos, to cater a specific need on what a technology can actually support an organization. If I talk only about value chain, right from getting some information from feedback from the market to customer service, technology was there. Now it is becoming more important, how do we extend that to supply chain? And also we can call it as a value network where majority of the academic institutions to supporting the government policies, everybody wants to get involved in what's happening. So that's where the collaboration is coming into picture. And then we are fortunate to have a platform where we can actually put right the product in front and then give access to the entire ecosystem where they can interact, collaborate, and then come out with some innovative ideas. So this is where the collaboration is actually picking up more.
Good to know, which in other words means more value, more significant role, opportunities to play even more significant role for a company like yours, and needless to say, better business prospects as well, right? So, as Jyoti also mentioned, he touched upon a very key point of policies. And everyone in this room, we all know about the government's role government's role across the world in paving the road for the adoption of EVs, and at least till that stage where it reaches a certain scale. When it comes to India, it all started with the NEMMP, right, Mr. Munjal, before the FAME policy, but FAME in 2015 actually kind of give a new push, and then came FAME 2, and as of date, it the FAME 2 is the tenure is expected to end in March 24, and recently we also announced, we also heard the announcement of further allocation of the budget of 10,000 crores to by 50%, which means 15,000 crores, but the tenure is something which is being debated and discussed among various industry players and even in the government. Just want to understand from you industry leaders, starting with Mr. Munjal, what is your take? How should the government do in terms of extending the policy, or do you think that the EV industry, at least the two-wheeler industry segment, has reached a stage wherein a policy support is good to have, but not necessary maybe, not absolutely necessary maybe?
Sumantra, and you rightfully said, the governments play a very important role at a global level when it comes to electrification, when it comes to conversion from what we are doing conventionally to any new technology that's coming in. I'll give you an example of moving from BS4 to BS6. if we didn't set our guidelines and if we didn't set our deadlines in place, how many companies would have actually made those investments or switch? Not that many. So there was a very clear-cut guideline which was there. There was a very clear-cut deadline which was there. In India, rightfully, we started off with the NEMMP policy in 2013, and then came FAME 1 in 2015, and then FAME 2 in 2019, which got revised in 2021. So the revision of 2021 is really where the huge growth has begun to happen. Prior to that, FAME 2 wasn't as successful a policy as was required, but because of the interaction that happened with the government and with the industry, etc., the policy was revised and became a good policy. Now we've hit a certain threshold. We've hit about 5.5% of the total industry in terms of, at least in the two-wheeler sector. So when we look at EV industry, the different buckets, two-wheelers, three-wheelers, cars, public transport, commercial vehicles, all will take off at a different level, all have a different requirement in terms of infrastructure, ecosystem, financing, different factors. Now, what happens thereafter? See, it's not good to have it's good to have long-term policies, but at the same time, the way that we look at it is that you should not be subsidy dependent. So subsidies are there to give you an initial thrust, but they should be milestone based. So you hit a certain milestone, they begin to taper down. You hit another milestone and they begin to taper down. Eventually the businesses have to make sense for themselves. But right now, we still need a couple of elements to fall in place before this industry really takes off in a very, very large manner. Those elements are more to do with financing of vehicles, for example. We still haven't been able to determine the resale value of the vehicles minus the battery. If the battery is no longer there, what really happens? So financing is an important factor. We need unidirectional policies, all of them pushing you, propelling you forward to reach a certain milestone, and then they can begin to taper down. The third is we still don't have any concrete deadlines by when we want to electrify. There are loose deadlines about 80% by 2030, and there are certain numbers which are spoken about, but we really need to set those deadlines in place. The other factor is a very important factor is the infrastructure that we need to put in place. Charging infrastructure. For two-wheelers, it's a very basic but very dense charging infrastructure that's required. It's a different case when it comes to cars and other forms because you need much more higher power coming in. There was talk of standardization of batteries for swapping, for example. Swapping policy is a good policy, but at the same time, you don't want to make it so standardized that it curtails innovation. So swapping is also, there's a chicken and egg situation there. Should the vehicles come first and then the swapping infrastructure, or the swapping infrastructure comes and then the vehicles will fall in place? It's important to have the infrastructure in place before the vehicles are really going to take off in a big manner. And again, there are multiple different companies, different technologies, etc., and different shape and form factor of the batteries. Now with AIS 2165 coming in, that's going to play a very important role in electrification. Another very important factor is setting deadlines specifically more for B2B, which is easily doable. Now, a large part of our deliveries are done using BS4, BS3 vehicles. Now, these should convert to electric, and there is economic sense in doing so also. The challenge that lies is more in the initial purchase price because it's not an apple-to-apple comparison. The delivery guys there are using older vehicles. They're going and buying older vehicles. And here you're buying a new vehicle, so it's not an equal comparison. But in terms of TCO, it's hugely advantageous for electric. So going forward, now the way that we need a little more support for a little longer, and then the policies can begin to taper down, because right now it's still early stage. We should not let up in terms of the push that is there from the government, either from the center or from states. Numerous states have already set, about 20-odd states have already set policies in place. They could be demand creation, or they could be manufacturing incentivization or subsidies, etc. Those we need to continue. Reskilling of workforce is another important factor. Getting the right workforce is a very important factor. We don't find the right skill set, specifically when it comes to things like high-tech areas, R&D, etc. So still a lot of work to be done. We're still not there yet, but we are on the right path. We are on a path where we are going to see multiple X growth over the next few years. So
in a nutshell, you would like the FAME policy to continue, or maybe another edition of the FAME policy, right?
We need one more push. We need one more push for a while longer.
Just what would be the timeline you would like to see for? time
Not
period?
so much as in timeline. I would put it more milestone based in terms of numbers.
Numbers.
The minute you hit about a 20-odd% of the total industry, you know,
At least till that
they should-
stage.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Then you begin
So basically
to taper down.
front-loaded. And
front-loading of policies.
Talking about policy and the incentives, I mean, just wanted to get the industry viewpoint on the recent the intervention of the government, which was forced apparently for misappropriation of funds allocated for the incentives. Is it a case of not so clearly articulated policy, or perhaps some kind of not so good practices by some of the players, or is it a mix of both, or what is it?
So but let me first and foremost, correct this whole word of misappropriation of funds that that came out in the media. Now, if you look at misappropriation is where you've taken money from a government which was meant for something else, and you've not put it to that use, and you put it to some other use. That is what misappropriation is. In this case, what it is that the money has not come from the government, has been passed on by the manufacturers, various manufacturers, 18 odd manufacturers, to the consumers, but have not got the funds from the relevant ministries. So there's no misappropriation of funds there. That's a completely misnomer. It's completely misreported. That's the first and primary factor. The second is, when it comes to any of these policies, these are not etched in stone. These are policies which are still, which have to flow, they are meant for expansion of our industry. Now let me give you an example of FAME 2 policy. When FAME 2 started in 2019, in April of 2019, there was a certain subsidy that the government was giving, 10,000 rupees per kilowatt hour, 20% capping on the policy, 2-year policy. And it wasn't an effective policy. This policy got amended in 21 to 15,000 rupees per kilowatt hour. The 20% became 40%, and suddenly it became a very good policy. Till 21, in the 2 years that the policy was there were less than about 70-odd thousand vehicles sold. Since the policy got amended in 21, suddenly over 600,000 vehicles were sold. So how do you gauge success of any policy? Now, these things cannot be rigid. They have to be made flexible. And you also have to take into account that there was 2 years of disruption in the market. So there's no misappropriation here. There is no ambiguity on the thing. But these policies, as in any other policies, have to evolve with time. These are like a living being. They cannot be written once and that's the end of it. They have to evolve to take into account what's happening on the ground reality, what's happening with the ecosystem. Now, for example, these are to do with PMP guidelines, which is phase-wise manufacturing.
Right.
Now, all of us manufacturers, all of us OEMs, all of us, we are not the manufacturers of all the components. We rely on partners to supply us the components, whether it's the motors, batteries, the powertrain, the drive systems, the electronics, and so many different components going. Now, those manufacturers, the component manufacturers, it's an economic business, it's an economic sense. If there is no volume in the market, they're not going to make investments. So a number of years back, it was difficult to get quality manufacturers to actually make investments or to make commitments towards investments. Now, that has changed now because the volumes are substantial, and suddenly now you're finding a number of players coming in. But earlier, that wasn't the fact. So these are things which evolve over a period of time, and that is what is required. And that's what I was talking about, is that you need unidirectional policies to be looking at one direction and pointing in one direction.
Unidirectional policies and sustainable policies, right?
Yeah.
Nishant, a quick thought on the FAME policies, tenure, and the nature of the support that the government needs to provide to the EV industry, and especially on the commercial vehicle side. I'm sorry, because of paucity of time, quick.
Sure.
So
I think the policy has been very forthcoming if I talk about the bus segment, because the lion's share, more than 40% of the FAME 2 was given for buses, since it's meant for the mass market, and it was the fastest to consume the whole fund base as well. And now the new allocation which has happened of about 5,000 crores for this coming financial year is a great boost for all the segments, where they would be again looking to see that in the same proportion they are allocating to different segments as they have in the past. Simultaneously, when we look at PMP and the localization, so that has supported in enriching and incubating the EV ecosystem. When I look at the EV ecosystem, so whether it's battery technology, vehicle technology, charging technology, power electronics, lightweighting solutions, and so on and so forth. a lot of companies have gone ahead and invested seeing the kind of volumes which could come in. But definitely, this is not the entire framework of volume which we would be looking at. This is a good catalyst which kickstarts and really gives a fillip to the industry to understand what is in it for everyone.
Right.
And companies really need to see that how are they using this as a goalpost for redefining economics and becoming more competitive, because competitiveness is very important. And here competitiveness is also driven by technology. So I think that is a very interesting point here. And that gave opportunities to companies like ourselves, like for every electric bus we generate about 2.5 million data points through our AI solutions every day. Right, so which gives an opportunity to really see and understand that when we are doing this, we are understanding the health of the vehicle, and more than 95% of the issues are addressed through remote diagnostics.
Right.
So that becomes an imperative. And with, I think, every stance and every next move, things take a leap forward. So we definitely need a policy framework for at least 3 more years, in my view.
At least 3 more years.
Which can look at it, whether we see as FAME 3 or extension of FAME 2 in a new avatar.
So you're saying that at least 3 more years to receive the intended and or the desired
Yes.
kind of achieve.
Yeah, even though today
goals.
we have already achieved parity in the bus segment, that's why the segment has now grown by about 70 to 80%. Even though when we had the supply chain shortages and other things, and now it will grow about by 500-600% in the next 2 years. So that's the kind of growth momentum which is there.
But
I
for
think
that, the policy remains to be plugged in. If you
Yes, yes.
plug it out, then perhaps it may taper off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right. Jyoti, quick word from you. Anything that you would like to see in the FAME policy in terms of its maybe a slight modification or maybe an extension, which would also kind of help at the top end of the pyramid?
I think from a FAME perspective, we have heard a lot. I think I totally agree. I think this should be continued. This will support the whole industry and I think different segments in its own way. I would rather say if we look at a broader policy framework, I think what we need to see, government has done a lot. When you see clear messaging coming that government is supporting EV from various angles, there are different ministries working on different sort of policies. But I think what we really need, in my view, there are 2 key important factors. One is certainty of policies and one is continuity of policy. If clarity of these things will make a big difference. So I think what Mr. Munjal said, I totally agree, there should be milestone based. Whatever it is, whether it is taxations, duties or FAME or anything, if it is with a clearly defined milestone, that will ensure for investments to come forward in different sectors and market to expand.
Right.
And I think that is one part. The other thing I would say, especially for EV, one important aspect where I think we need a stronger policy is, I think we were talking about earlier also, we heard about personal solution for chargers, right? Which means that you are dependent on your local power distributor to sort of facilitate that. That is, I think, if you go state to state, the challenges are different. So we need a policy framework where this can be much easier and customers can sort of very easily, if it's like, if I were to install a charger for my personal, whether it's a 2-wheeler or a 3-wheeler or a 4-wheeler, it should be easy to install without any sort of bureaucracy or time frame, or I think every state having a different sort of approach. So I think things like these will definitely ensure, but government is doing a lot. I think we are being nudged in the right direction.
No, absolutely. The government's contribution has been well accepted and appreciated by the industry, but there is also an industry viewpoint that now more clearly defined and more sustainable policies will help India to become a global EV hub in the mid to long term, perhaps. So on that note, gentlemen, thank you very much for sharing your viewpoints and your perspectives. Because of paucity of time and some of our panelists will have to leave immediately for some other very important engagements, we end the discussion here, but the rest of the panelists are around to have a quick chat in case any of you would like to catch
just
up.
to add one point,
Yes,
on
please.
the technology standpoint, to support all these policies, the sustainability is actually taking a major role, right?
Right.
So we've been under tremendous pressure on how you can actually put a technology which can actually support these policies. Something like, for example, EV itself is with some purpose.
Yeah.
EV itself is made with a purpose on how we can contribute back to the society. The entire ecosystem is actually looking at new products, new innovative materials, new way of communication.
And
new way of
sustainability
bringing-
is a cornerstone
Exactly.
for all the
And-
strategies across
yeah,
segments.
Exactly. So
not
all
only in
these
the automotive
applications,
industry.
what we are building
Yeah.
is now actually coming up with the measurement on how an organization actually measure their net zero commitment or the policy. So that's where we have been under tremendous pressure, and we are fortunate to kind of bring all those aspects into the picture so that it can be validated at appropriate time, so that even a single prototype, physical prototype
Right.
reduced is nothing but a contribution to the society.
Absolutely. And
Virtually, you can do that.
migration
Yeah.
from physical to the virtual,
Virtual.
is what will can help in this journey towards
Absolutely. Absolutely.
sustainable, right?
Absolutely.
On that note, thank you very much for sharing that perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. I hope it was a very informative and insightful session for you all as much as it was for me. And gentlemen, I hope it was worth your time participating in this session of the 7th ETAuto EV Conclave. Thank you very much for your participation and your time. Now, I hand over the reins to the MC, and thank you once again. Big round of applause for our esteemed panelists.